Just like our rail lines, fiber optic cables, the interstate highway system, I suggest that forests are an essential part of our nation's infrastructure, and we should start investing in them accordingly. Listen to what the writer for the New York Times, Peter Kilbourne, said about the nation's highways back in 2001. He wrote, "The 46,000-mile network of limited access roads that make up the interstate system is a linear economy on wheels, a distinct and self-sustaining 51st state, in a sense that generates life and commerce." What a marvelous description. A linear economy on wheels, a distinct and self-sustaining 51st state. Our nation's working forest should be considered our 52nd state, a self-sustaining 400 million acre economy in green that provides us with clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, carbon sinks to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and a source of renewable energy, not to mention the more than 2 million jobs that depend on them. It is profoundly disturbing to see Congress's current treatment of infrastructure, branding all investments as wastes, and ridiculing any program that contemplates investing for the future. This is government at its worst. Short-sighted and shallow. America cannot cut its way to greatness, and the private sector cannot shoulder alone the burden of rebuilding our critical infrastructure. These investments benefit us all. Clean air, clean water, energy independence, good jobs, and are precisely the kind of investments that we should be making right now. Congress's behavior reminds me of the time that the great Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson went on a camping trip. You didn't know they were outdoorsmen. After a good meal, they lay down for the night, and they went to sleep. Some hours later, Holmes awoke, and he nudged his faithful friend. Holmes said, "Watson, look up and tell me what you see." And Watson said, "Well, I see a fantastic panorama of countless stars." And Holmes said, "And what does that tell you?" Watson pondered a moment, and then, not wanting to disappoint his intellectually superior companion, he said, "Well, astronomically, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I observe that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I deduce that the time is approximately 3:15. And meteorologically, I suspect that we will have a beautiful day tomorrow." "Why, Holmes? What does it tell you?" Holmes was silent for a moment, and then he spoke. "Someone has stolen our tent." You see, like Watson, we tend not to notice our infrastructure until we have a problem. As a nation, we didn't acknowledge that our bridges were crumbling until one fell into the Mississippi River. We didn't worry about the loss of 90% of the wetlands along the Louisiana coast until New Orleans was almost wiped out. And we didn't seem to care that our electrical grid was terribly outdated until the Northeast was blacked out. If it had been raining, Watson surely would have noticed his tent was gone. And we need to recognize the critical importance of working forests before they, too, are gone and the services they provide are no longer available. Consider the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta is the fastest growing human settlement in human history. The fastest growing human settlement in human history. The city of Atlanta, over the last 30 years, has cut down and paved over almost all of the forests that provided its groundwater recharge, the source of its drinking water. They didn't think twice about it until the drought of several years ago when they came within 90 days of running out of water. You don't think about running out of water in the East Coast. Atlanta came within 90 days of running out of water. Today, the city is buying up the very land that they cleared, paved over, and built subdivisions or shopping centers on. The city is buying up developed land, tearing out the pavement, and replanting forests at a cost of more than $500,000 an acre. They could have bought the forest in the first place for less than $500 an acre. Forests are infrastructure, and we need to start behaving that way. The good news is that most Americans have already accepted the fact that we need to invest mightily in our nation's infrastructure. In a recent national poll, a near unanimous 94% of Americans were concerned about our nation's infrastructure. 84% of the public wants more money spent to improve America's infrastructure. And here's the kicker. A majority of Americans said they were prepared to pay 1% more in taxes if that's what the money was used for. Farm bill is being debated as we speak. It is tens of billions of dollars. There are only 2 million farmers in the United States, and their clout is enormous. There are over 10 million private forest landowners in this country, and yet we command only a fraction of the nation's attention. We need to come together as the farmers have and speak with one voice about the need for strong markets for forest products, reducing regulatory risk, generating favorable tax policy, and dedicated public funding for forest conservation. Just yesterday, the House released its markup on appropriations for the Department of Interior, which includes the Forest Legacy Program, the single most successful program for protecting working forests in this country. They cut the entire budget to less than $100 million. It has never been that low since the inception of these programs in 1964. We need to reframe our conversations about forests to include water security, energy independence, jobs here at home that cannot be exported overseas. For these, too, are all part of national security. Forests as national security, forests as infrastructure. And there is something else we must do as well. You see, before we can ask the American people to invest more in forests, we first need to convince them that those forests are and will be well managed. And that's where forest certification comes in. Certification provides a window to the public into the forest, and it provides them with independent assurance that certified forests are managed well. And certification is working. Certification has fundamentally changed the way forests are managed here in North America. SFI alone has certified nearly 200 million acres in North America, trained more than 130,000 loggers. It's a record of success that no other system can match. In addition, SFI requires its program participants to invest in sustainable forestry research. Research, critical to the forests of the future, nearly $1.3 billion since 1996. SFI is the only certification system that requires investments in research. These, among other achievements, are in part why I came back to the Sustainable Forestry Initiative Board. As Hans said, this is my second term. I served a full term, including as chairman of the board, and now I have come back in a leadership position. I was part of the board of SFI from the very beginning when it was a voluntary program created by the industry itself. I came back to the board because SFI is making a real difference on the ground. I came back because the vast majority of the world's forests, 90%, are not yet certified. I came back because there is so much more work to do to make sure we do not continue to lose millions of acres of working forests in this country each and every year. These are the great challenges that we face and are what I and all my colleagues at the Conservation Fund and on the Sustainable Forestry Initiative Board are dedicated to addressing. One thing I can tell you I did not come back for, however, was to waste countless hours responding to the steady stream of falsehoods being spread about SFI. And yet this is exactly what we see over and over again from the activist community. Facts imagined, claims made. Well, what is to be done about it? Adlai Stevenson once said, "I offer my opponents a bargain. If they will stop telling lies about us, I will stop telling the truth about them." But my kids had a better idea. In spite of my efforts to get them outdoors, they love to watch this show on TV called Mythbusters. Maybe some of you have seen it, where the stars of the show debunk common myths using good science and demonstration projects. So we at SFI and a number of other independent research organizations such as Dovetail Partners, the Pinchot Institute, and others went to the published literature, conducted side-by-side analyses, looked at the results of certification audits, and reviewed the certification standards themselves. And the results are stunning and frankly very damning to the credibility of the campaign activists. For instance, clear cutting. The Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, and its proxies have perpetuated a perception in the marketplace that FSC does not allow clear cuts. You can find it in almost all of their materials. And yet it simply is not true. All certification standards allow for the responsible use of clear cuts. FSC Canada's own National Boreal Standard, which represents 25% of FSC certified lands globally, has no maximum clear-cut size restrictions, none. And yet, the following two quotes are on websites offering advice to consumers on green products. From Home Renovations, if your counters are made from wood certified by FSC, you can rest assured it was not the product of clear cutting. All grammar notwithstanding, that's a false statement.